Welcome to Game Theorem, where we have serious discussions about absurd entertainment. So what are you watching, Kyle?
Oh, an anime. The main character is so awesome. She's really tough and sexy.
Wait, it says here on Wikipedia she's 16.
What? Wait, what? Why? Why?
I'm Kira.
I'm Kyle.
And today we're talking about...
Anime. Well,
anime.
Not just anime, but this problem is very big in anime. We're talking about the tendency for media to be pedophilic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I hope you understand, we're going to try not to use that word specifically too much.
Mm-hmm.
We'll use it when appropriate. It might slip out, but we're calling this podcast episode Age in Anime, and we're talking about the tendency to really sexualize young characters in media, particularly anime.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of anime uses underage characters, and a lot of anime has mature themes.
And that's not a problem. I mean, one of the great things about anime is the mature themes. So many cartoons and animation in other parts of the world or in other styles don't grapple nearly as much with mature themes. Or at least, not historically, they haven't. So the fact that anime tried to do that, I think, is what really drew a lot of people to anime, right?
Yeah, and it's not just about that either. Like, there's also a thing where bad things can happen to children or underage people, and like, that is just a thing that happens, and a lot of media tends to want to gloss over that or ignore that a lot.
Oh yeah, definitely. People think that content made for children means that it has to have no emotional weight or depth or just tragedy to it. And that's just not true at all. Children experience bad things. They are not unique in experience. And children just die all the time, to be honest. Let's be real. Like, I think we definitely have a thing, especially in America, of over-sanitizing media that's supposed to be consumed for kids. It's why cartoons inherently have a belittling tone to them. When you talk to people of older generations, they're like, "Oh, that's a cartoon. It's made for kids." They implicitly assume it's not for their consumption. And to be a little fair to them, much of it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. The problem comes when you use these underage characters as sex objects and sexualize them in a lot of different ways.
Right, because just because you have mature themes doesn't necessarily mean you have to have underage characters, right? Mm-hmm. But you can.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is if one of the mature themes you want to do is, sexuality, right? Mm-hmm. Having underage characters can definitely work against that.
Yeah, definitely.
These two things don't go well together.
Mm-hmm. There's just no reason for underage girls to be sexualized so much in anime.
And it only really seems to happen with girls. Although I guess it does sometimes happen with boys, but with boys it's usually just that they're put into a sexual situation. The girl is always the object that is sexualized.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And like, the fact that this is so prevalent...
Oh, wait, I guess we kind of put this up front. We should have said trigger warnings for pedophilia. But, I mean, we did say that this is what the episode would be about. But anyway, this is a dark episode, just so you know. Mm-hmm. Sorry to interrupt, Kira.
It's fine. I mean, honestly, there's a really disturbing implication of the desire to sexualize these underage characters, of how pervasive it is in culture. Like, there is a reason that schoolgirl uniforms are supposed to be sexy. There is a reason that youth is tied to desirability, and it is a very disturbing reason.
I mean, I would push back on the schoolgirl uniform one a bit, because there's a lot of just kind of kinky play with, like, cop uniforms, nurse uniforms. I think just the idea of uniforms in general gets a lot of, like, sexual attention.
Yes, I agree. But the school uniform thing is specifically because if you're young, you're the only reason you're wearing it is if you're a kid in school.
I would argue that's an implication of it, not necessarily the cause.
Fair enough.
Because again, other uniforms get equally as much play. And look, I don't like the implications of you pretending to be a cop either.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd much rather you be like a sexy pretend cop as opposed to a real one.
Yeah. And honestly, the equation, how would you say this? The equation of youth with desirability?
The implicit correlation.
I guess, yeah. Honestly, we just made laws that say that, yes, that is a thing, but we're going to draw the line here.
Right. So, okay, we'll get back to talking about anime. We have some examples, but we need to talk about the way pedophilia just is an undercurrent in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I think that's pretty universal in at least much of the industrialized world.
Mm-hmm.
With the big rich nations, right?
Mm-hmm.
America, Japan. There's a lot of similarities there. Mm-hmm. I've lived in Japan. I mean, I always like. I mean, I'm not saying I can exactly empathize with the Japanese perspective because I was, just a visitor in their country, right? Mm-hmm. But I'd like to think I can at least identify the similarities here.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the problem though is, first of all, obviously pedophilia is bad, right? Mm-hmm. Adult taking advantage of a kid. A kid cannot consent. Mm-hmm. The idea behind that is that the kid, by the very nature of only having existed for so long, does not have enough information on sexuality to be able to make an informed decision. It's like a doctor, right? A doctor, you need to get informed consent before they can operate on you, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
And the reason is because puberty is a process that happens throughout adolescence. And so the problem is, where do we draw the line? Much of the world has decided 18. 18 is the line. After 18, you've probably already gone through puberty and adolescence. You have enough agency to be able to call that informed consent.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, to be honest, ask any woman the first time they were harassed sexually or in any way. It's like the majority of them were a lot younger than 18.
Oh, yeah. It's like every other woman will tell you that was the first time.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about anything personal about that, Kira?
To be honest, I would have to say that personally, I haven't been catcalled or harassed very much, but that's just because I'm, I guess, not the typically desirable woman. But my best friend...
That's not true. You're very desirable.
Uh-huh. My best friend, who developed early and was looked much older than she was when she was younger. She experienced a lot of abuse and harassment when she was younger.
If you don't mind, can we just be a bit direct with our language and just say her breasts grew in early?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. She had double D's, and that was basically a license for men to harass her.
And by men, you mean boys? Oh, no, you mean like literally like overage men.
Sometimes, yes.
Wow.
And even then, I can remember specifically her telling me about these two, her best friend and her best friend's older brother, who was an older teenager who abused her a lot and that kind of thing. And it's like, she's been through a lot. But basically, yeah, when she was like 12 or 13, that stuff was going on. So, yeah.
Right. And so we don't want to get into this too much, but it is worth acknowledging that the concept of the age of consent is a line that is drawn arbitrarily.
It definitely is. And then you draw that arbitrary line and it's like, oh, well, 18 and up is okay. And then there's a whole fucking porn category dedicated to barely legal, just turned 18.
Right. And a lot of people recoil from discussions of age of consent because there are a lot of bad faith actors that only want to discuss it so they can like lower it. They say like the idea of a line is inherently fallible, which might sound like a reasonable point, but then their solution is just get rid of the line, and that's obviously not a solution.
No, it really isn't.
Like most things in the world, there is a bit of a spectrum, right? Obviously, a 40-year-old man being with a 17-year-old person is pedophilia and wrong. But what if two 17-year-olds are with each other?
Yeah.
Society mostly kind of turns a blind eye to that.
Yeah, that's true.
And if you're okay with that, I would argue, well, then the law must be inadequate because then you're selectively enforcing it.
True. And I definitely agree with that.
So, and then there's the problem on the opposite end of the spectrum, like you were saying, that making it 18 where it's the legal age, and so now it's okay, suddenly it's like, wait a minute, is it really that okay, though? Is a 40-year-old person being with an 18-year-old person that much better?
No.
Does that year make that much of a difference? I would argue that relationship could still inherently be predatory. It might not be statutory rape because it doesn't cross the arbitrary line, but it could still be very aggressive and manipulating the younger person in that scenario.
Yeah.
And I think this talks to a lot of what we see in media, like you were saying with pornography, with how since we've drawn the line at 18, a lot of people think when they're making characters that, oh, well, if you just make them 18, that's good. It's barely over the line, and that's as low as we're allowed to go. Yeah. It really makes you think that if the line wasn't there, they'd be going a lot younger.
Yeah, which is really disturbing.
I mean, because honestly, sometimes they just do ignore the line and go a lot younger anyway.
Yeah.
Especially in anime.
Yes, but I will say there are examples of this in American media too. There's one I want to bring up later, but yeah. And it's not just about age though. Because people inherently tie age with virginity and this concept of purity. When you're imagining someone who's a virgin, you're not imagining some 40, 50-year-old woman who's remained celibate until then.
Exactly.
You're imagining a teenager.
Right. And because you're not imagining like, oh, here's an 18-year-old girl. She's very young, technically legal. But, you know, as kids do, she's had a lot of sex over the past few years and she's certainly experienced now. No, you don't see that either.
No.
You don't see that, nor do you see the very celibate, spiritually pure or whatever 40-year-old woman. You always see young, naive, innocent girl, easily to manipulate, or you see the very experienced older woman who you have no interest in. When I say I'm like talking about like a framing device from the media.
Yeah, definitely. And this whole concept of purity is just so ridiculous.
And I mean, by the way, I know we were singling out girls because a lot of this is sexist and affects women more than men. But it does still happen with men.
Yeah, it does. Definitely.
I would argue the concept of virginity isn't as strong on them. But it is there. It just kind of has a different twist to it. You might have like an 18-year-old man who's like, I'm still a virgin and I'm legal now. We gotta fix that. You know, that kind of situation.
Yeah. You just reminded me of this stupid movie.
You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to.
The 40-year-old virgin. And that title should tell you enough.
Do you want to discuss it?
No, not really. Just, it's a stupid, like, the whole thing about men and it being made into a joke of we gotta fix that. They made basically a movie being like a joke about, oh, what if he was a lot older and we had to fix that. And it was just really stupid. 'Cause it's not funny. Like, it's just not. Don't make fun of boys or men for not being interested in sex. Just don't do it.
Yeah, if there's a man that's like celibate or asexual, I can speak from experience on that just doesn't want to have sex, there's nothing wrong with that.
And the way men are hypersexualized means they get harassed for that kind of thing. Like, if you have male friends, if you're a man who has male friends, they'll make fun of you for not sleeping with enough women or crap like that.
And there is the concept of the incel, which is kind of its whole bag of worms.
Yeah.
But basically, if you're a 40-year-old man who's never had sex, but you wanted to and you didn't have the opportunity, well, first of all, just yet another reason why we should allow more sex workers, then that man wouldn't have a problem, right? They could just pay someone.
Yeah.
But if they wanted a consensual, romantic, intimate relationship, then it sounds like they just need therapy or something. They need help, not to be ridiculed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That too. It's like, if a man really does have sexual hang-ups to the point where he kind of wanted a relationship and wanted to have sex with a woman, but just wasn't able to maintain a healthy relationship long enough for that to happen, then he doesn't need misogyny to make fun of him for that. He needs a therapist to help him work through those hang-ups and help him become more confident and a better person so that he might actually have a healthy relationship with a woman and be able to sleep with her.
Right.
If that's what he wants.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are people that think that, our world has a problem with some, like, evil group of people in charge that are doing, like, pedophile sex rings and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. And that's ludicrous. It's laughable. But the unfortunate thing is they're hitting upon a kernel of truth there. And they're appropriating it for their own political ends, of course. Fascism. But
yes, but there is a pedophile sex ring. It was called Jeffrey Epstein's, what was it? A boat, a train?
Island.
Yeah, Jeffrey Epstein's island. That there.
And his plane.
Exactly.
The Lolita Express.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you know what? We should plug, there's a podcast out now called Lolita, which talks about basically, the book about, like, pedophilia. Mm-hmm. And discusses how originally it was a critique of pedophilia, saying how it's bad. Mm-hmm. And since then, it's been adopted for unsavory ends.
Yeah, it's a really good podcast. Who's the host?
Jamie Loftus.
Yeah, Jamie Loftus is the host.
She gets, like, probably 100,000 times more views than us. So
yeah.
Let's move on. Anyway, so all right, but so there is a problem with preying on young people sexually, but it's not that concentrated. I would argue that the problems you see of the people in power, like Epstein and whatnot, is pretty universal and nonpartisan. After all, you want to know who was on the logs for Epstein's island? Mm-hmm. Donald Trump, mm-hmm. Bill Clinton, Stephen Hawking. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty universal political partisan subset.
Yeah.
From just America alone.
Yeah.
I think also, wasn't there some British... Oh, there's a bunch of people in those logs. The point is, when you're looking at the wealthy class, it comes from across them. But it's not like they're the only ones doing it. It's a problem that pervades our society. The wealthy are just able to abuse and use their money to get away with it.
Mm-hmm. And, like, I think part of the problem is the fetishization of purity and virginity. Because you will see older men...
Well, no. I don't think that's the problem, though.
Well, I mean, I think it's part of it.
No. I think the underlying problem is wanting to take advantage of children. It's like
rape.
Oh,
I see what you mean.
It's
yeah.
rape. It's the power fantasy and the control.
Yeah, you're right.
You aren't with a young person, whether it's like barely legal 18, naive, a virgin, a literal child. You aren't with them because you really find their looks that attractive. You might find them attractive, but that's because we've been, like, culturally and societally taught to think of that body as attractive. Mm-hmm. Just like when you think of the stereotypical attractive, voluptuous woman, right? Mm-hmm. They're with that person because of the power and control they get over them.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the obsession with purity and virginity, I think, is a cover for that. I don't think it's the real issue. The real issue is pedophilia.
You know what? That's true, power. because the thing with that is, it's fetishized because they're inexperienced, because you can take advantage of them. Because if they're inexperienced, then you can mold them into exactly what you want them to be.
Yeah, because on the face of it, People have fetishes and kinks. You want to have peanut butter on you while you're doing sex, whatever. Have fun,
Mm-hmm.
And if your thing is, oh, I want to be with someone who's never done it before. I want to be their first time, even though I've already had experience. On the face of it, that's not inherently bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just want a very specific type of experience as like a kind of teacher role, I mean, not a literal okay, that's a loaded phrase.
No, I get what you mean. You want
a tutor? No.
you kind of, oh God, this is, okay, look. You kind of have a kink of wanting to corrupt someone, wanting to sort of...
Sure, yeah. Now, the problem, though, is that immediately raises red flags, because that's not really the reason you want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to help bring them up to your level, teach them their first time and whatnot. You want to take advantage of someone who isn't experienced enough to know what you're doing to them.
Exactly. Because if it wasn't that, then you'd be okay with having someone older and just role-playing that fantasy.
Yeah, roleplay is such a great thing. It's why, there's consensual non-consent. Someone might have a fantasy of... I mean, the extreme version is, say, a fantasy of being raped. But let's just say, you want to have a fantasy of, a bunch of guys just, ravaging you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can just stage that
Mm-hmm.
and do it in a safe environment.
Yep.
And so if you really wanted to have someone pretend it's like their first time, that's why I'm not so against the idea of the school uniform kind of idea.
Oh, I get what you mean. Because it allows you to safely role-play that kind of fantasy without taking advantage of someone.
And it's not inherently pedophilic, although I understand how it kind of brushes up against that.
Yeah.
Because, you don't want to literally role-play a child. Because then you're just pretending to be a pedophile, and that's not much better.
Yeah.
So, we wanted to talk about a bunch of anime where this comes into problems. Because we feel like we've talked about the underlying conditions, and we could go on, but, we have a podcast that's limited runtime, right?
Mm-hmm.
Safe to say, this is an issue, and we're going to talk about all the examples. We have a ton of examples.
Yeah.
And the thing that really gets me with these examples is oftentimes there was no reason at all for the characters to be underage. No reason.
You could have the same exact plot, the same events, the same exact thing happen, and just age them up into actually being adults.
Yeah, because I don't want to tell you, oh, you can't do that mature theme. You want to have a character literally walk around butt naked all the time? Well, I'm a prude, I'm a Puritan, you can't do that. No, you want to write a story about a character walking around butt naked, go ahead and do it. I mean, I hope you do it well. I hope it's a good story. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're a nudist or something, who knows? But I'm not going to tell you to wipe the sex out of your story. What I will tell you is you can't do it when they're a kid.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a lot of examples of this.
And also, as much as you might want to debate the arbitrary line of age of consent, right now it is accepted that 18 is the line. So if you don't meet 18, even when you're doing 18 and you're making it barely legal, I find it very questionable. But,
well, if you're doing 18 and you're their other 18-year-olds, it's a fun young adult thing of relationships and falling in love and exploring your sexuality and stuff like that. That's fine.
I would watch that story and I could enjoy it.
Yes.
But I would also say the story would still be improved if you age them up a bit.
Fair enough.
You don't need to try to butt up against that line as much as you have to. Mm-hmm. Right?
I honestly just wish we got more anime about adults.
Yeah, genuinely. And I think part of it's so egregious because so much of it's fixated on high school. And, there's already a higher level institution. You could do college. It's basically the same environment, just older.
This is why I like the anime I told you about, Nana, because the main characters are college age. They're in their late teens, early 20s. So they're all adults. The setting is in college, and it's an adult anime about adult people and their adult lives, and just that's so rare to find.
Right.
That's so rare to find.
So why don't we go through the examples?
Oh, wait, one more thing. I am also sick and tired of them using kids because they always do the crap of like, oh, because I'm so young, because I'm a kid, like, I don't know what sex is, and I'm so embarrassed, and I just...
Yeah, the joke is put the kid in the sexual situation and haha, it's funny. They don't get they're supposed to like this. Look at that kid being showered in naked women. They should be enjoying this, but because they're a kid, they don't know, they don't get it. Ha ha. And it's just gross. It's disgusting.
Absolutely. And it's not just that, it's like, I just want to see adults being able to be in adult relationships where they don't have that stupid, oh, I'm nervous to hold your hand or to kiss you or to go further than that.
You know what? You could have, the joke I was just making fun of, you could do that in a responsible way. You could have a character who is of age, at least, right? Or older. And who's getting showered in naked women. And maybe this is a character that has explicitly been boisterously saying how hetero they are, saying like, oh yeah, I love the women. And then suddenly they're showered in naked women and they get all shy and embarrassed, not sure what to do. Then the joke is like, you said you wanted to be showered in women, and now when you are, you're acting all embarrassed and shy. Ha.
Yeah.
See, that to me carries a lot better.
Oh, yes. Oh, there's another anime I watch with an adult woman who plays online video games a lot, and she doesn't have a lot of relationship experience, and she gets into a relationship, and it does that awkward first time stuff, but they're both adults. They both have their own place to live and stuff, so it's not just awkward first time stuff, it's also like, ooh, the first time I've stayed overnight at someone else's apartment, that kind of stuff.
I want to kind of talk about, real quick before we get into the examples, of why do kids keep showing up in animation? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it has to do with capitalism. How you thought we weren't going to talk about capitalism again? But no, seriously, whenever we market a show, a movie, a show, or a TV show in animation, we have to depict what the demographic's going to be. It's going to be rated eventually, and you have to do it. Some shows might try to mix up genres and whatnot, but a lot of the times you kind of pick one and you stick with it, right? Mm-hmm. Is your show for kids, or is it intended for adults? Mm-hmm. If you set out to make your show intended for adults, then you can be as mature as you want. The sky's almost the limit, right? Mm-hmm. And then with kids, you have to set a pretty firm line on the subjects you will not talk about, right?
Yeah.
Which is why the most popular age rating of all is teens. Because with teens, you get to push the envelope. You get to kind of weasel back and forth,
Yeah.
You get to okay, well, there's some things we can't talk about, but you can talk about these other things. And you can't curse too much, but a few F words is fine.
Yeah.
You get this very gray area. Mm-hmm. And you can also try to simultaneously appeal to the children and the adults. The Marvel movies kind of come to mind. Mm-hmm. Yep. Marvel movies, you got kid comic book characters making jokes about testicles. Mm-hmm. You get the best of both worlds. Now, they're obviously allowed to get away with a lot because of how rich they are. Yeah. But this is a problem that pervades, I think, why we see kids so much. Because there's an implicit idea that if you're going to sell content to children, the characters must themselves be children. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to sell content to adults, the characters must be adults. This isn't necessarily true, but I think you will see it pans out to almost always be true. Mm-hmm. But when you get into the teen areas, you often get a situation of they are literally underage. They're teenagers. They're not adults yet, even though you might literally put them in an adult situation. Mm-hmm. And that's where we get a lot of problems. That's where we get a lot of this pedophilia. Yeah. And it's not unique to it. I do think anime kind of skews on the latter end, where they make overtly mature subjects, but for some reason are unwilling to put adult characters in those shows. Mm-hmm.
Are we going to talk about the examples?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I went on a bit long.
Yeah, it's okay. The most recent example we've talked about is Future Diary.
It's the reason why we wanted to make this episode.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's been brought up several times before, but Future Diary was kind of the last straw.
Yeah. Honestly, do we need to get into it?
Well, one of the problems with anime, because it's animation, is a lot of the times you'll have characters that are being overtly sexual, and you'll be fine with it as a viewer, because it will have never been choreographed to you how old they're supposed to be.
True.
I can't tell you the number of times that we've seen something in anime and then later found out, wait, they were underage the whole time? They were 15 or younger? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, especially
Because they were drawn like they were adults.
Yeah, exactly. That too.
And they hid the age. They literally it's almost conspiratorial the way they hide the ages sometimes. And some contrarians might be like, "Oh, but they were living with their parents. You should have known they were kids. They were going to high school." First of all, the turning 18 happens during high school, so that's not enough information to tell you when so many people are obsessed with making it barely legal, right? And then second of all, living with parents is such an American hang up, to be honest.
Yeah,
like many adults live with their parents.
Yep.
Sorry, you were gonna say?
Yeah, remember when I told you that, yeah, I did the calculations and Yuki and Yuno were 14 during Future Diary.
And they had sex at one point.
Yeah.
Off screen, but still.
Yeah.
And one of the characters was literally 12 when she was put as a sex slave in a cult.
Yeah, like, I didn't
in
realize
the worst scene of that anime.
Yeah, I didn't realize she was that young
and
when
they were
that happened.
And I mean, it wasn't pornographic, obviously. But I mean, actually, it was a little. They showed her breasts, I think, didn't they?
They kind of blurred it out.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
But but my point is it was gratuitous. It was offensive.
Yeah, they showed her like naked, laying on the floor, and they didn't show any detail. But yes. And I
don't want to say again, you can't talk about what that but it's not like the show ever acknowledged that she was a child, you know?
Because you can find out that she's 16 during the show, and then you find out that it was 4 years ago when her parents were killed and this whole sex cult thing started.
We should make up like a term for this. Like coin a term, and then like in future anime episodes of our podcast, we should just reference it so we don't have to rehash this all the time.
Oh my god, yeah.
We should call it anime age math.
Yes.
Like, oh, here's a character that was like, she's pretty awesome and sexual, but there's some flashbacks where she's also sexual, and we did some anime age math. It's not good.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just. It's so disgusting, and the reason this keeps happening is because of trying to butt up against the age of consent. Mm-hmm. We should probably move on to other examples, but I want to mention like Dragon Ball, for example.
Yeah.
Because in Dragon Ball, they start off as basically kids. Although Bulma, as the female character, starts off as a teenager, and she is extremely sexualized, even at like 15.
Yeah.
Like, literally the only, from what I heard, this might have changed, but at one point, the only, like, sexual anime figurines that you could buy for Bulma were her as a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah.
This is despite the fact that Dragon Ball has a huge time scale. The show advances, like, over decades.
Uh-huh.
And so Bulma becomes an adult, has children, and she could be sexualized then freely, but they started her off as a kid, and they sexualized her even then.
Yeah. Like, we're watching it right now, and she must be, in her 40s at this point? She's middle-aged at this point? But yes, when she was a 15-year-old, Roshi, an old man, was being super creepy to her, and yeah.
Yeah. It's a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it just pervades the early seasons of the Dragon Ball show. This also applies to the other female main character love interest who got wifed, Chi-Chi.
Mm-hmm.
She wears literally a bikini as a child. Also, the creators had this weird pee fetish that they kept doing.
Yeah, it was really weird in the beginning.
Well, they kept doing it with the kids, but it felt like they, for some reason, were only allowed to do it with the kids. I don't know what's up with it. But Dragon Ball has some serious pedophilia issues, which is extremely unfortunate, because I do think there is a lot to like about Dragon Ball.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if Fairy Tail's another really popular anime, and
oh yeah, we did that one.
Yeah, Lucy. Enough said.
Well, okay, no, I gotta say some more than that. Well, first of all, you can like tell when in the Fairy Tail story that the characters finally aged up to 18.
Because they finally started showing them naked.
Yes.
Not like pornographic naked, but like
Well, I mean, there's good
implied
content.
nudity.
There's good content there because, like, Urza, you know, she's a strong, independent woman. She uses her body the way she wants as an adult, and it's great.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, anime age math, you go like, wait a minute. So all those scenes that they were sexual before they were underage, what?
Yeah.
Like, when you have to, like, look it up on Wikipedia or the Fairy Tale Wiki or whatever to find out they were underage, it just makes you feel so gross inside.
Yeah. Because it's like they all are treated as adults. They're all independent. They
Yes.
go on jobs and have their own, like,
They have breasts the size of their heads.
they have their, they have their own homes and apartments and like they pay rent and they worry about money.
And they fight like legions of evil.
Yeah, they're portrayed as adults the entire time.
Let's see, what else we got? We covered Danganronpa, right?
Mm-hmm.
We did a lot of Danganronpa. That one's a bit of a weird... so the characters believed that they were 17, but they were actually 2 years older than that, 19.
Mm-hmm.
The sexualation's still pretty egregious in some instances with, like, flashbacks and whatnot.
Yeah.
And there's some also weird stuff with, like, Mikon and Junko when they're younger.
Yeah.
But after you get past a certain point, kind of like Dragon Ball, but because of the weird story of Danganronpa, most of the series is after that point.
Yeah.
It's fine, but we wanted to bring it up because there's definitely still that problem there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how hard is it if you do have barely adult characters that when you have flashbacks, don't sexualize them?
Mm-hmm.
Or you know what? You know what would have been great?
What?
One of the characters, the ultimate idol, Sayaka Mizono,
Mm-hmm.
she's sexualized as a 16-year-old. She's literally put on magazines and dressed very skimpy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Either don't do that and play into the pedophilia, or do some commentary on it. There could have been commentary about, like, wait, isn't she only 16? Isn't it weird that this academy is selling off these magazines of a 16-year-old dressed this way?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, she's the ultimate idol. Everyone loves her. And, like, this could be, like, a critique on, like, idol culture in Japan and other, like, Eastern Asian countries.
Yeah, definitely. That would be really cool.
But obviously they didn't want to go there. It was a gag scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kill la Kill.
This one makes me upset.
Yeah, the main characters are high school girls, and while their skimpiness and their nudity is plot relevant,
It's literally a show about the concept of clothing and nudity and patriarchy.
yes, and to be fair, it seems like they are seniors and therefore 18-year-olds.
Oh yeah, they're definitely portrayed as adults.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is literally like president of the school, the dictator, the emperor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, but as you watch the show and it goes on, you learn more of the backstory, right?
Yeah.
And as you learn more of the backstory, at a certain point, you can stop and do anime age math.
Yeah.
And realized, wait, you started off the year at 17 years old. The characters are 17 when you're seeing a lot of the sexualization.
Yeah.
Now, again, the show happens over the course of a year, so by the end of the show, they're all 18, so they do kind of that fairy tale crossing the boundary thing.
Mm-hmm.
But they're being sexual the entire time. And it's just gross. I legitimately began to wonder if, like, the Japanese age of consent was different than America. Is it 17 there? But no, it's not. It's 18. Ish. There's asterisks all over the place, just like there are in America. We looked it up.
Yeah. Interestingly though, the one character who is outright kinky is 21 in the anime. Remember Gamagora and his thing? Like,
Right, but don't you think that's a little weird? He was a male character, and he was allowed to be a few years older.
yes, but they did sexualize him.
Right, but because he was a man, it wasn't as important for him to be barely legal like the others.
Yeah. But yeah, he was 21 and he had a bond. Like, the show literally shows that he has a bondage kink.
Let's see, what else we got? Ruby?
Yeah, all the characters in Ruby are 15. And while in the show itself, they don't sexualize them. The creators in the fandom sexualize them a lot.
They do have the characters kind of flirt with each other and do interrelationship kind of stuff. And, like, I don't know. Here's the thing. Obviously, kids are going to date other kids, right? 17-year-olds are going to date 17-year-olds. 15-year-olds are going to date 15-year-olds, right? But at a certain point, if you're making a show about 15-year-olds dating 15-year-olds and it gets kind of heated, you kind of start to feel like a voyeur watching it.
Oh, yes, yes. I get what you mean. Yes.
Because at the end of the day, unless the show is like being specifically targeted to like 15-year-olds or people around that age, if you're older, it feels kind of gross.
Yep. And this problem isn't exclusive to anime.
No, it's in plenty of media, including media that's inspired by anime, like Homestuck.
Yeah, in Homestuck, they start off as 13 and then 16-year-olds. And to be fair, they just kind of joke around using sexual terms and stuff. Like, they aren't heavily sexualized.
Well, I would argue they talk like a lot of young people nowadays probably talk.
Yeah, exactly.
But even then, with their social interactions, you start to get that voyeur kind of effect, right?
Yeah.
It just feels like you could have avoided any kind of controversy here if you had just aged them up a bit.
Yeah.
And they do eventually, like towards the end of the story into Homestuck 2, they're adults by that point. They do age throughout the show, kind of like the problem with Dragon Ball. And unfortunately, Homestuck doesn't put them in overtly sexual situations. It doesn't get pedophilic. But sometimes the characters do act pedophilic towards each other.
Yeah.
Like, there's literally one relationship. It's probably the most egregious example in Homestuck. But there's these two alien characters, Vriska and Mina, that get into a relationship where one's 13 and one's 19.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like the writer completely forgot how old they were.
Yeah, they use the whole stupid afterlife ghost thing to justify it, being like, well, you don't know how long Vriska was here. It's possible. It's just ridiculous.
Okay, but then that comes across as the garbage, like, oh, I'm an infinite-year-old dragon that has like a child body.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's like, no, like, I don't think people understand this, but simulated assault is just one step removed from assault. It's still bad.
Actually, the most egregious example of Homestuck is in the epilogues. Can I talk about it?
Which one?
Vriska.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I don't think that was as egregious, though, to be honest. But you say why. I'll retort.
Okay. So in the epilogues
Of Homestuck.
Yes, of Homestuck, Vriska comes.
Hey.
What?
Summarize it. Don't
Yeah,
give every detail.
Vriska comes back as 16. While time has passed for everyone else. Everyone else is middle age, and she comes back and immediately ends up in this hate sex situation with one of the middle-aged characters who's been sitting there on her Earthsea aging the entire time.
Yes, Gamzee. He's 36 by that point.
Yep. And it's like, she was 16 when the last time we saw her. And this guy's 36. Like, just,
Yeah, they didn't really talk about her age so much, but they have since confirmed that she is still 16.
At the very least, physically. And it's like...
Well, doesn't make it... Time didn't pass for her.
It didn't make it okay, anyway.
Time didn't pass for her. She's 16.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to push back on that, because while, yes, that is pedophilic, it was more, I think, pedophilic on the point of the character as opposed to the media framing.
Oh, yes, because Gamzee... You know what?
Because Gamzee would totally be a pedophile.
True.
Gamzee is an awful character. He's framed very awfully. If you have an issue with that, you could raise an issue with that. I definitely think the story did not draw enough attention to the age difference, and so it seemed really more accidental coincidence than anything. But I would totally buy that Gamzee is just that awful a person, and he dies shortly afterwards, and everyone moves on because he's kind of garbage.
True.
But yeah, the point is that by having child characters, you run into these problems. If you really aren't that concerned with age, then have them all be adults and you don't have to worry about it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. There's just no reason to specifically make them younger than
Like,
that.
I'm actually, if I may, I'm actually kind of writing my own novel at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're helping me with it, but yeah, we're writing a novel.
You're doing the writing. I'm basically just your editor.
Sure. And in the story, we literally just like excised all children out of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a mature subject, and we don't have to worry about age.
Yep. Exactly.
I mean, you can still have power dynamics, 18-year-old with a 473-year-old, right? But as long as you keep an eye on that, then you're fine.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I laughed because that's actually possible in your story because of...
Well, time starts to break down in this story.
Yeah.
It's about the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, well, where were we going? You have some other examples here that are exclusive to you that I haven't watched if you want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Other examples of this issue not being exclusive to anime are these high school shows that pretend that have a bunch of adults playing high schoolers and then just sexualize them a ton. A lot of examples of that are like these high school drama shows that they decide to add sexuality to. And now these high school shows, they want drama, so they include lots of sexual relationships, but characters are supposed to be teenagers. And like...
Do you think Buffy the Vampire Slayer would have a similar problem?
I don't know. I think they might be 18 in Buffy.
I don't know, but they definitely have the same issue that a lot of American live action shows had, where you'd have clearly adults in their 20-somethings playing children.
Mm-hmm.
I think Harry Potter could be described as this as well.
Well, no.
The later movies, when they're supposed to be 17 and they're being played by 20-year-olds, yes.
Well, they've been doing Harry Potter since they were kids.
Right, but it took them longer to make the movies than the time span of the show.
Oh, yeah, I see. Fair enough.
So they started off at the same age, but by the end, the characters had only aged to 17, whereas the actors had aged to their 20s, if not 30s.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, these shows like Degrassi, Rivendell, Glee, where there's a lot of these high schoolers in sexual relationships. It's pretty disturbing, especially, for example, Degrassi has outright pedophilic relationships sometimes because they want to portray a teenager dealing with a really older person that's in love with them or
I mean, do they acknowledge the pedophilia and talk about it?
I would say that they probably admit that it's wrong, but
they don't say why.
I will say that I cannot say for sure.
Okay, well, I guess what you're saying then is they handled it poorly.
Yes, okay. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that basically wraps up all the examples we had that we thought of in our list for now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you could think of plenty of others.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think the real lesson to take away is that, taking advantage of children is definitely a real problem. We do our Cinemodded Fallout series on the side, right? Where we play through an extremely modded version of Fallout New Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And there is going to be a part of that story where we have to discuss this. Because there's a mod that is some really awesome stuff, but decides to start poking and prodding at what it means to be a pedophile at one point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's pretty gross and disgusting in the way it tries to ask it, because it's written by someone who's never actually faced that issue.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to try to address this in one of our episodes. It's certainly going to be demonetized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think the lesson you want to learn is that this problem is very pervasive and real.
Mm-hmm.
And just like with sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, if you don't purposefully look out for it, you're going to end up being complicit with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you don't purposefully try to be anti-racist, then your show's going to have racist themes in it.
Yeah.
Again, Dragon Ball, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
there's like one black character in Dragon Ball that's not racist, like not depicted in a racist fashion.
Yeah.
And then there's sexism. Female characters get wifed all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want to hate on Dragon Ball too much, especially. But this is a problem. These things tend to be comorbid with each other. That's why I would argue that pedophilia doesn't tend to be as much of a problem when you have more progressive and socially aware media.
Yeah.
Because it's not that pedophilic themes are impossible to find when you start getting like left wing. What it says is that oftentimes those problems are recognized and corrected before it ever gets to your eyeballs.
Yep.
Not all the time. I'm sure.
Yeah, not all the time.
Yeah, I'm like there's a few. Like I would say, Homestuck is pretty leftish, right? Moderately, at least, and it still has these problems because they chose to employ child characters.
Yep.
And you can have child characters and have it be a coming of age story and have it not be in an overtly sexual place. But people seem to want to do both at the same time, and that just always results in problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as much as I think you might want to have a story about like a kid going through a brutal, dark, and visceral world, and that means they butt up against sex, right? I think there's a way of doing that tactfully that doesn't indulge in the pedophilia.
Yeah.
But you have
definitely.
to acknowledge when you pick that as your story, you have to be aware and looking out for it, and you're going to have to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, how legitimately would a child be scarred if they accidentally, like, walked into a brothel or something in your dark world or whatever? You know?
Yeah.
Inherently, that would mean you're writing a mature story. I don't think you could probably pass that off for kids.
Obviously, yeah.
Although I do think we sanitize stuff for kids, but I don't know, that might be a bit much, right? But you can't just act like it's a funny situation. You can't just act like that kid's gonna love those girls. No, they're a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
You've written a story at that point about casual pedophilia, or at least you've written a situation that explores those themes.
Yep.
So I guess if we should probably end it shortly. Do you have anything you want to say, Kira? I got one more thing, but I want to give you a chance to talk. I'm sorry I talked so long.
I really agree with you that this is a problem in media, and I just wish there was more anime with adult characters, because there isn't enough.
Or I wish more than barely legal 18-year-olds.
Yeah, that
I'm
too.
so sick of high school related stuff.
Yeah, so sick of high school stuff.
I guess if you want to summarize this into a takeaway lesson, all of you listeners, I guess I would say to you, enjoy your anime pornography. Look up all the anime-related pornography. All your favorite characters, look them up naked and doing the sex and stuff. But research their age before you do so. You might not be happy with what you find. And curate your pornography accordingly. Be responsible.
Yes. This has been a PSA.
You can find our Twitter at Game Theorems. I'm
Yeah.
Kyle.
I'm Kira.
Bye.
Bye.